I think that during the Great Resignation, right, attrition was at the highest levels in our lifetimes, right? Companies were battling, significant attrition. They're trying to keep their doors open. It was a environment with the Great Pandemic at the same time. So to compare the Great Resignation and the increase of compensation to where we are today is you're comparing apples and oranges, and that's what we really are, right? So if you look at today, resignations and attrition have gone way back down to normal levels, sub 10%. And so that's also bringing the compensations that employers have to offer candidates back into that normal range. We've also seen, even coming out of the Great Resignation into where we are today, we've also seen a little bit of an issue around salary adjustments, right, and comp equity. So the people that stayed with companies during the Great Resignation, and the new hires that were coming in, they are getting, and they likely have anywhere between 10 and 30% higher on a comp scale than those loyal employees that were with the company during that time period. So now companies are trying to juggle that as well, right? So they're juggling also, they're juggling lower attrition, they're juggling a comp equity issue, and they're also juggling a marketplace that there's a lot of hesitation in the marketplace today. So it's bringing everything back. The pendulum shifted back a little bit. And I think that as we go through 2024 and 2025, we will start to see some increases in certain areas, like, for instance, AI developers. That is an area of hot demand, and those AI developers are really, being able to demand their compensation structure where they see fit. But again, to compare the Great Resignation to where we are today, it's really not a fair comparison because the businesses are under different pressures today to find the talent and to bring the talent in. I think the bigger piece of the puzzle, well, 3 points that I'd say the bigger piece of the puzzle to this is that one, knowing the comp and ben ranges for the industry, right, and having that data. So talent acquisition leaders need to work with HR about comp and ben, not just what's in their strategies are, but what is the industry demanding, and have that ready. So you're talking about 10%. In some instances, it might be 5%. In some instances, it might be 15%. If you were in the life sciences space in R&D and oncology, you could see anywhere from 20-25% still right now. So it's having that consultative approach is going to be critical in looking at that budgeting process. But I think the other thing that people need to realize is that, as we go through, the budgeting process, you do have to factor in attrition. We are, attrition is natural, attrition is healthy, right? And so you need to be able to factor in, if you have a team of 100 and attrition is 10%, you need to understand that you're going to backfill 10% just to keep or 10 people, just to keep the baseline of where you are today. And if you look at those 10 people, then you also need to know that if the increase is 10%, that needs to be into your budget. So there is a little bit of a math equation that goes into with the HR equation that you have to look on the budgeting perspective. But the bigger piece in all of this, and what we're seeing with a lot of our partners, is really that globalization approach to many jobs now, right? So if it's a remote job, we can find individuals that will work off hours, and for a company in California, we can find people that would work with them in London, for instance, or Singapore, right, or in Australia. And so, there are other areas and there are other ways that TA professionals and TA leaders can help the business side meet their budget demands at potentially lower costs than having somebody in the Bay Area, for example. I think there's definitely part of that, right? There's that hangover from the Great Resignation, I would say, and employees that didn't leave, right? That saw their peers leave and get a bumping increase. They're like, hey, now it's my time, right? Now, why can't I get a 30% increase in raise? I was loyal to my company. Now it's time for me to make a change, and here's where we go. I think that for those that did leave during the Great Resignation and then also now are looking to leave again, a couple years later, they're like, hey, I just got 30%. Why not get another 30%? But what's interesting about our survey too is that 32% of the people said they wouldn't stay for any counteroffer. right? That they've just made that change and they've made that decision. And 44% said, 30% was that magic number for them. I think that 30% there is that hangover for that, but it's also you have that history there, but asking for 50% might be too much, asking for 10% might be too little. So I think that there's also a psyche in there as well. But without a doubt, there is a hangover from the Great Resignation. And I think those individuals that were, I'll say loyal, I've used that word a couple times in this interview, loyal to their firm, they've seen their peers jump and they've seen their peers get increases. And I do believe that now they're thinking, hey, it's my time now and I should be able to get 30, 40, 50%. Really not an average, right? And I think the advice I would give to employers and the advice I consult our partners with, is look at the external market, right? You look at the external market. If your strategy is to bring new ideas in, right, then don't give a counter offer, right? But if the strategy is, hey, you have great talent in front of you, you have to compete in the external market. You cannot be handcuffed to your current HR policies that said, okay, we don't give anything more than 10%. Because if you do, you're going to lose some great employees that way, right? So, the external market is with pay transparency now, it's a great way to understand, how, where you are. But there's not a steadfast saying 10% on average, in a sense of, hey, that's the median or that's the average piece. I do believe, though, that employers need to really think about when to give a counter offer and what are they counter offering. Our survey, again, found that 32% of people did not, stay, with a counter offer. And, 73%, right, if you look at the counter offer that was presented to them, were not incentivized to stay. So you're the monetary piece is a big piece of the counteroffer, but you also have to look at the underlying issues. Is it capabilities and skill set? Is it the work environment? Is it the hiring manager? Is it that, they come from this, great resignation. They stayed loyal to the firm and, now they're looking for a different change. From a recruiter perspective, there's so much more about the employee value proposition than just comp, right? But comp is a big piece of it. And what recruiters need to do, and what we tell our recruiters here at Hudson RPO is be very upfront, right? Be very transparent because you do not want to get to the process where it's offers coming out to the candidate and there's that delta from between 10 and 30%. That's never a good situation, right? So the recruiter needs to coach, the recruiter needs to educate both the hiring manager and the candidate on what the feasibility is on that comp range, right? In that regards. And employers need to understand too that comp is a big piece of the cornerstone, but there's so much more about being an employer of choice, right? Making sure that employers feel challenged in the workplace, making sure that they have they're not micromanaged, making sure they have the flexibility within their current job description to grow and to make changes. And that dynamic is not just about compensation, it's about so much more. And I think that's coming in, we're seeing that in even some of the responses. I mean, I don't know of one employee that would say, hey, I am overpaid for my job. Let's face it. I think majority of people feel that they're underpaid or that they're paid adequately. And employers need to do and will continue to do and offer solutions of a great workplace. And that's bringing in great people that will be peers, that will inspire them. That's having affinity groups and philanthropic activities that they can be a part of. So again, it's the compensation is big. It's a big piece. It should not be the only piece, and that's the really the responsibility of the recruiter and the employer.